Perfect. I hope you enjoyed the lovely lunch and had some coffee. I don't want anybody to fall asleep. Okay. Welcome to the afternoon roundtable. I'd say the auditorium table of today's workshop. And we have distinguished guests among us, as you can see. First of all, I don't think we need introduction, do we? Not again. Let's not lose time. I mean, you're all experts. And thanks again for your contributions in the morning. And I will just sort of pose a general question which everybody has been dealing here lately, maybe except for UK buddies. So we've seen that European Union has set itself quite a high goal with CRMA, and then also several projects were presented today that deal with the first part, let's say the innovative part, how to address those challenges. Now, as far as we could see, we have done quite serious advancement on that, but then it stops. When the projects deliver their ideas, they don't really get realized in real life. And one of the biggest challenge, at least what I see, would be convincing first the general public and the politicians how to introduce real mining projects in Europe back again. And this is a complex question because there are multiple layers of either social acceptability, lack of technology basically also in Europe, and lack of financing. Nobody wants to finance a mine that might not be opened at the end of the day. So, Chris, you're from the States, so I'm going to leave you a little bit, not out of it, but I'm going to give the floor first to European colleagues. And let's just start with Austria. Okay, Austria has a long history of mining. You still have some mining there. And how would you see the opportunities where European industry could be involved, or financing institutions could be involved effectively in reintroducing mining in Europe?
The industry is one thing, but let's say regulations is another thing, and social acceptance, and meaning politicians. So in Austria, we have the discussion in the moment, more or less, for the last years, over lithium mining. Yeah? There is a mine, and it's already more or less could be started to open it, but in public, the mayors are running, and so I think there should be some taking also people into the discussion from the very beginning, not that when they hear about something, because I think common people have something like common sense, and they understand if they are informed in the right way, what the benefits are, why we need it, and what does it mean really. So here I think in this, because in Europe I see a little bit politicians are doing their job, and there are some people below, they don't know anything still till then something is happening, and then big turmoil about. So I think there should be much more direct engagement from the very beginning. Information. Not only that we want to do it, but to inform about what we need, why we need, and so on.
Okay, thanks. I think that there's another big challenge that we're facing is populism. It's very easy to blow the public, or to feed the public with false ideas, because they are much easier to understand than to understand the complexity. How is UK dealing with such a perspective?
Yeah, that's really interesting. As you'll probably be aware, Cornwall in the southwest of England is historically a very big mining area, and the social license to operate there for mining is really strong because the community recognises that it means employment and skills and opportunity, and that's not normally the first thing people think of when they think of open pit mining. They think of ecological challenges and leaching and all this sort of stuff. So I think that just to follow on from the previous points, I think that communication of what the long-term benefits are of establishing mining activity is absolutely critical, because it just gives you that it gives the local community that's the one, if you like, having to accommodate the mine, visibility on what they're going to get from it in terms of value. So yeah, we've in the UK there has been some activity on this front for the first time in a long time in recent years, with British lithium and Cornish lithium growing in this way, because they have done this, and the community there is very receptive to mining because they know the value it's offered in the past. So yeah, I don't have a perfect answer in terms of how to do it, but certainly looking into those businesses, that's what I'd observe. I don't know if you have any different thoughts on that, Enzo.
No, I probably agree with everything.
Well, maybe we'll just pass the mic. I will come back to you, but just pass the mic to.
Yeah, it's working. Thanks, Tom. No, I think generally speaking, I'd say I'm in full agreement with everything said. And also, again, just to touch on that point around sort of populism, for example, public opinion, so on and so forth, I think, particularly within the context of Cornwall, the mining legacy there, you know, you've kind of got the situation, it's incredibly multi-generational, like centuries of industry in tin mining, for example, in a lot of Cornwall and Devon, which was ongoing, and then these things slowly came to, in some cases, quite an abrupt end, and you end up with sort of core industries that really shaped, in some cases, a regional identity of people, family identity, offering employment in so many different contexts. And I think generally, in places where you've got that dramatic shift from having a sort of a large-scale employer of people to then having either being replaced with something else, or there being no real core replacement or core industry replacement, I think in some cases it can certainly lead to disenfranchisement of people. And maybe that has some links to the populism that you were citing, Marco. So I think in terms of addressing some of those concerns around populism, so on and so forth, in certain regional areas around the UK, regional clusters, I think there's a very real sort of causality that you can draw between the disappearance of certain key employers and key industries, and bringing those back in the most responsible way possible, I think, can create a lot of value for local economies, but also at a national level as well. Yeah.
Thanks. It's interesting that you mentioned this positive legacy towards mining. My perception was always the same, but then it struck me in February. We met in my country, in Ljubljana, in the framework of one European project, and we went to Idrija, which is the second largest mercury mine, was the second largest mercury mine in the world. And nowadays it's a geopark. And we asked them, would you be open to an idea to reopen the mine? And they said, no, geopark is doing so well, we don't need another mine. And I was struck, because they are really, for the 600 years in the past, linked to mining. And it sort of sets a different perspective to it, doesn't it? I mean, it's not only the mining legacy, it's also how good the population is living. And that brings it back to you. If somebody moves out and then there's no jobs, then the mining has, remining in Europe has bigger chance. I mean, it's a sort of Faustian dilemma, isn't it? But so what would your outtake be from the challenges that we are dealing in Europe? What are your experience in it? How would we deal it?
Let's say in Greece, we have a long history in mining. We had a big mining center in Lavrium, which was the biggest mining operations there done, which is now closed, and it's closed not like you mentioned, like a park. It's closed only. It's closed for the public, and it's open only for conferences and It's under our universities, our NTUA university heritage activity. What I want to say is that in Greece we have the same problem with the population, because now the new generation, it's not interesting in mining and mining operations, because we have different educational policies right now. The universities are more focused on developing managers, business operators, and not so into science of real work. So the new generation, it's not interesting in work that could be done in a way that will bring more jobs to students, let's say, who don't have the opportunity to study or don't want to study something more complex. What I'm trying to say that we are not, as a country, we are not improving or promote the power of a worker, but what we are promoting is a power of how to manage the workspace or operations. This is, for me, it's a huge gap between the reality, because as we say, we can be all scientists, we can be all managers. Someone needs to do the actual work. And this is our major problem in our country. We have great minds, but we don't use it well.
I don't think it's the problem only in Greece. Chris, you were addressing the knowledge, vertical knowledge within the domain. So what would the experience from USB, and what could be the suggestion how in Europe we could deal with it? If you're advanced us.
Maybe we've done more to define the problem. I mean, it's the exact same situation we have in the U.S. Trade workers, technical workers. We just don't have anywhere near enough. What the other secondary challenge within it is, so a lot of there was a big effort when oil and gas went down. Can we shift people, a lot of transferable skills, over to the other industry? And at least within the U.S., the problem we ran into was identity. Folks are like, no, I'm an energy person. So even when they got trained and the jobs were there, they didn't make the jump to go from the energy sector over to the mineral sector, and or vice versa. So there are these deeper social connections, like you were saying, like within old mining communities, things like that, that people have built this identity. So it isn't just the skills; there's this other social interconnect that is also impeding the ability to efficiently redeploy labor and everything. And that's sort of more of an emerging issue that we're starting to try to take a look at how we do it. One aspect is the government in the U.S. has really defined minerals as an energy issue. It's all lumped together. And that's, I think, a subtle push to say, these are all interconnected. So,
thanks. Let's leave the knowledge domain right now, and I'm gonna ask Nabeel. You come from EIT Raw Materials, so I know quite a lot because I've been involved in EIT Raw Materials from the external perspective about what you do. You finance sort of startups and spin-offs and upscales, but then it doesn't come to that realization of mining being reintroduced in Europe. Have you thought about making a step forward, how to also address that challenge? Because you're quite connected with Euromines, with the sector that actually provides materials in Europe.
Yeah, thanks. I think we are, what the perspective we get from the EIT raw material side, we are moving in that direction that the society is, especially for the critical material project, they are aware of the challenges, and we have some good cases. And also we are not that bad of, that we lost everything. You look at the big companies, for example, LKAB projects in Sweden. So it can be done sustainably, Eramet in France or Boliden, for example. So there are good cases, and along with the time, if you have challenges, you have the technology to address those challenges. So we have seen that, and also the new startups and also the funding requirement, multi-consortia funding requirements, if you look at, so some of these proposals are actually from these companies to solve those issues. So you take along the social aspects, but also technology challenges that also comes with the workforce challenge or the trained workforce. So you, at least partially in Europe or Western world, you could replace that challenge of the workforce with new technologies. We have the new project, for example, mining, robots, or processing, highly industrialized, robotized processing. So and on your question of restarting the mining in Europe, especially for critical materials, we are engaging. So the Critical Raw Material Act and the strategic projects, if you look at the traditional European way of thinking, you could never expect the Commission is proposing something like that we need to re-industrialize in the mining sector. So we are pushing as a group to have this in Europe, especially some of the critical raw material projects. And said that, Europe as a group also has its own challenges that you cannot deal with certain national requirements, so that has to come from the national governments. But we are aligning largely on that as well. Yeah.
Well, thanks. I mean, to think of it, the whole process is quite longly, right? I mean, first of all, we don't actually know what exactly we have in Europe yet. We know for some areas, but for most of the areas, we don't know what is below 300 meters. So we have no clue. And everything starts with the exploration. But even starting exploration has huge challenges from the social acceptance perspective. I mean, first of all, Europe is too densely populated, and you can hardly expect to be successful in doing any exploration in there. Even with new technologies, you'll need some time. So from your perspective, Norway, okay, have you in a different way approached this lengthy process, or you're just following the same route as everybody else? Because I see Scandinavia a little bit more successful, maybe because it's remote, it's less populated, but still.
From Norwegian perspective, I would say for the fan deposit and resource, we had a little bit different approach. We involved the social scientists in very, very early phase of the process, I would say. And generally we see a tendency that like mostly the companies are taking this initiative to communicate with the stakeholders and the local community. And then I think there is a missing part here, because like there should be a translator or the storyteller to transfer this, let's say, scientific information or the technical information to the locals, to the society, to trigger firstly the social awareness why they need this mine and why they need to have it there, and like how it will impact their life. Because if they think that like the let's say developing process will reduce the environmental impact of the mine itself, maybe they will have like a bit better understanding. And then if they, let's say, if you are yourself don't want to have mine in your backyard, let's say, this is just because of your, let's say, perception about the things itself. But when people talk to the company representatives, they don't feel that like they are receiving the correct information, or let's say neutral information. But when they have the scientists to answer their question, they feel safer, I think. But it's not enough that this scientist, this technical scientist, it should be a social scientist, as I mentioned, to do this storytelling to them, how they will affect, how they will be affected from the overall process, what they will get. Maybe it will be job realization, maybe their life will change a bit in a like better manner, maybe they are well aware of the, let's say, the geological situations like the tensions and this kind of stuff, but they are not maybe capable of like connecting the dots. So it's very important for all of us, I think, to involve the social scientist, because mining is not, let's say, area that involve the social scientist in there. Like, we are a bit working isolated generally, very technical part, but it's very needed now, because in Nordics or in whole Europe, we are a bit more democratic than the rest of the world, right? So we need to maybe do this storytelling to be a bit more successful, so to say.
Well, thanks. Yeah.
There's one principal problem you mentioned, the trustworthy of industry. And the problem of industry is they want to do the marketing and they are the best and so on. But that's not the point, because people have some experiences that they were told something not so, or it was said in a beautiful picture, but the disadvantages were not mentioned and so on. So I think industry has also to work to regain trustworthy, because only to advertise and to be the best is not the best thing in this case.
You have to be honest. Also,
you have to be honest. Yeah?
Both sides. Yeah.
On both sides, and I think from industry side, that's not. They have to do a lot. I don't say every company. Many companies are more or less okay. Let's say it this way. But in general, economics, they tend to be too good in this case, in their marketing, in their advertising. Yeah?
I think that has to do with the selling point. I mean, you always have to be better than the competition.
Yes, but I think in this case, I think industry has to adapt. So only comment.
Thank you. You're dealing with the processing further on from what is mined. So from your perspective, does the processing industry face similar challenges? And if it does, has it addressed it a better way?
No, I think there are many issues here regarding the way the raw materials are being exploited, and how all the value chain is being understood. Okay, so what the industry wants, it's first to make money. Okay, and then we, I think, as a society, are making several adjustments and a very rapid shift for now, which implies a very intensive use of materials. Okay, and I think the perception of the society didn't reach that. Okay, it was not well transmitted to all levels. Okay, of the society, and that is several implications. Is having several implications. For example, you have shown that one of the strategic projects in Portugal is related with the lithium exploration. Savannah. But the local communities are totally against, okay, the starting of the mining in that area. Okay, but all of them want, for example, to have a cell phone, okay? But they don't realize what is needed to produce that, okay? And I think this is one of the big issues, okay? try to make things more understandable to the general society. However, at the same time, the way that is being done, I think it's being done not in the more suitable way. So the way that people nowadays receive information and get the information, we have several tools to do that. We never had so many tools to transmit information. But to get there, to get the attention of the youngest society, for example, and other society, we need to use the right tools. And I think that is missing. It's just missing.
Thanks. I'm going to skip you, Ludivine, because you're taking very valuable notes. So I'm going to take advantage of that. And I'll pass the word to the next speaker. So from your perspective, we've seen the communication challenges that we face within the, let's say, the whole value chain of mining towards the end of the product. But again, what can we do in Europe to attract investments in mining? Because that's also something that is missing, isn't it? I mean, you can open a mine eventually if you persuade the people, but in Europe we don't have any major investment opportunities. We don't have anybody that would be willing to put money into it.
Well,
or am I wrong?
No, I suppose you are right, but I think that the 47 strategic project that has been approved, and it seems that this year will be approved more, is the right approach. Probably for only private investment, the risk is too high, but if you arrange some kind of partnership, some kind of support from different public governments at European level, but also local level and so on, this risk is mitigated, and you will have their opportunities for the investment coming. It's not exactly mining, but I have explained this morning that there are coming, we are reopening manufacturing plants of magnets in Europe. And this is because and these plants are being built with private investment, but they are backed by public funding, public support as well. So I think that this is the way. And the other point, I suppose that is true for mining, but also for industry, manufacturing. The other point is if this kind of business can be profitable in Europe when you are competing with countries where, for example, the salaries and the social conditions are, they have less labor costs and less social costs than in Europe. So I think that somehow this must be considered. It's a tricky problem, but I think that somehow this must be considered as well by the politicians, and let's say increase the level of exigence for this foreign product that come to Europe, somehow to guarantee that at least, for example, they can compare with European products in terms of carbon footprint or social right. I don't know exactly how this could be implemented in practice, but it's another way of promoting this kind of investment in Europe as well.
Thanks. So Alexandre, to you then, would you agree that if at the European level, let's say a European Development Bank and also European Commission in a way could co-finance such investments? I know it's not completely tolerable right now to support industry, but if we look at the rest of the world being competitors, then within Europe we can basically facilitate our own internal investments. I hope I'm not violating any economical rules right now, but some thoughts about that, and also maybe engage local communities in being shareholders within specific or all of investments to facilitate their acceptance.
Thank you. The question is not if it should, but if the Commission have to. I will set first the ground that energy transition is not very well known as a mineral transition. It's not only sun to produce energy. It's not only wind to produce energy. It's not only EVs to move for carbon-free move. It's about rare earths, and it's about a lot of critical minerals. So we know the position. The risks are very well known. Some actors using their dominant position in the market. For the rare earths, we talk about a monopoly, integrated monopoly. So how you face that? You ask the question if the Commission has to should violate some economic laws, but how about monopoly? How it works? So it's just a question. We have, let's say, high price on energy here in the EU. We have good salary compared to others. So we have manpower with high salary. We have the highest or close to the highest standards. And we have very thin access to minerals. How we can compete? So I think that the question is in the answer. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. It sort of occurred to me several perspectives. We were talking about the let's say environmental awareness of European consumers and footprint, etc., etc. But why is it still? I'm going to skip from what cannot be mined to what has to be grown. Why is European consumer still buying cheaper potato from Morocco than from next field in France, I would say. So my thought would go into, they don't really care where it comes from, just as long as it's cheaper. And how do we address that? Because that's, I think, one of the drivers of the origin of Myanmar rare earth elements. They don't really care. If the whole Indochina gets eradicated, the end user, I'm really direct now, and they don't really care about it. And it comes back to the complexity of our domain. I had this interesting talk the other day with a person from Portugal that was in my town, and we drove back to the airport at 3 in the morning. And he was in the event domain. So he organized the event. He was a psychology-based expert. And I asked him, how can we address the challenge to speak to people, and especially to youngsters? How can we educate them that the domain, the geology, metallurgy, mining is interesting, it's necessary? And he said, you know, you're dealing, well, you come from too complex science. Nowadays, youngsters, they want simple things. They don't want to deal with complexity. They just want, let's say, black and white. Ludivine, you raise your hand.
Yes, thank you. I will continue the notes after. But I just want to jump in on this because mining minerals is my career and my life, and I love us. But 50% of any problem is the person looking at you in the mirror, okay? So we are part of the problem right now. First of all, we have to stop thinking we're special. Every single sector faces similar or comparable issues. There are sectors who do not apologize for existing. So let's get over our insecurities and stop apologize for existing, okay? So you look at particularly the European policy circle, the chemicals industry, which by the way is responsible for Seveso, all of the environmental protection requirements in the EU, has countless issues, scandals, and corruption, and by the way, to a large extent, continues to source from systemic rivals in a way that is endangering not just our transition, but actually our security. That chemicals industry is currently the single most powerful industry in European policy conversation. Let's show up like adults, take our seat, and be part of an adult conversation. And I'm sorry to say, oftentimes, as mining and minerals, innovators in mining and minerals, actors in mining finance, we don't do that. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that the problem of social acceptance is that we're trying to place accountability on people who don't have it. Citizens don't get paid to know where their stuff comes from. It's part of our capitalistic system. We have built globalization on this. I understand that they should, and it would be great if citizens cared where their potato or their cell phone comes from. But they don't, and that's a fact of life. Who gets paid to care? The manufacturer who actually makes and sells the phone. Because you know what? The profitability that you get as a brand, consumer brand product manufacturer is orders of magnitude more than anybody in their value chain. That is where accountability lies. In the EU, we will talk about supply measures on minerals till we're blue in the face. I was on a panel in Krakow with a representative from the German government who said out loud, no, I'm not going to force German industry to buy from standards-based markets or to take on more responsibility for their sourcing. Until we get that response, none of what we're doing matters. Accountability is downstream. That's where the money is, that's where decision is, that's where demand is. They are the pump to the entire value chain. Let's use our political capacity, our political capital, and our mobilization towards that. I realize that's very political, more than technical.
So what one solution could be? Let's detach the lobbying organizations from Brussels completely.
Brussels or the capital, it's the same issue.
I know.
We are not showing up to the conversation most effectively. Also because there's 17 strategic raw materials, 34 criticals, plus whichever 52 are going to be on the next list. Every single one of us, we have our investment pools, our big players, our key demand drivers. It's hard for us to agree amongst ourselves. But then nobody pays attention to us. Brussels or the capitals. I mean, the EU has been pursuing lithium to the exclusion of almost every other strategic raw material. What's the net result is that we have a complete gap in PCAM capacity in the EU. It doesn't matter how many battery factories you build. If you don't have PCAM, it's all blue sky. We need systemic thinking.
You had a comment.
No, I partially agree with that, with what we have said. But I think the problem is that Europe is dependent on raw materials, okay? And what we are talking here is to start remining here within Europe. And for that, I think we need the support of the community. Okay? It's just not otherwise. It's like is happening in Portugal, I think also in Czech Republic and other places where the local communities are against. And as you mentioned, the younger generation don't want to have long histories. Okay, they are scroll 5 seconds, a video of 5 seconds. If they don't like, pass to the next one. So how to transmit that to the general public? Okay, I think it's needed.
Yeah,
but otherwise Europe will continue on the state that it is.
And I think to do that, we have to be clearer about the narrative. We've sold a transition narrative which was untrue, and now we're telling people transition is great, but actually we're going to need it for defense. We keep changing the narrative, so of course they don't believe us. But when I say we, it's policy as well as the industry. Collectively, we need to define those priorities. Maybe if we have 3 priorities instead of 17, we can get through to them.
That would be the easier part, yeah. Well, I always try to remind people then when they say, well, the government or the country as a government is responsible. Well, think of it. You are part of it, so you are the part of the community. You're selecting the government, so you're part of the problem or the solution. Please.
Yeah, I want to react on some of the comment just there. I think we are moving from just-in-time mode production to just-in-case mode production. You need to realize that, and it's not even more a flat world. Like Thomas Friedman said, a flat world, everyone on the same level. But it's more an EU interdependence software was, let's say, plug on this flat world. And now we are moving to a more autonomy or strategic autonomy. And it's moving from just in time to just in case. And the question is, what is the price of resiliency? Because a flat world with just-in-time is less expensive than a just-in-case world.
Yeah, it also is, it could be much more expensive in the long term, because what you mentioned is something that I relate to what Chris has said before, that US is now thinking of deep sea mining. And I saw that if that happens, it's just going to cause domino effect with the rest of the world, because all the treaties that we have might just crush down, and everybody would say, well, if my neighbor is doing it, why shouldn't I? And I'm going to pass the question here to UK. How strong is commitment, let's say, to some sort of sustainable approach to it? Because Chris, in US, you've lost that last January, that December, whenever. So in Europe, we still, European Union, we still try to follow that goal. I'm not sure how long, but for now. But I have no clue about UK.
Is this in general, Marco? So not specifically in relation to deep sea mining, just...
Well, in general,
wider.
but still it relates back to the treaties that we have, the international law that we, for now, still try to follow, because then that also brings it the deep sea mining, which is a huge discussion and challenge.
I think the deep sea mining element of the conversation is a very interesting one. I'm no expert on the topic, but I have had it explained to me in terms of how the international treaties works. And I've seen a couple of expositions at the Natural History Museum in London during events where there are actually a couple of companies who are actively doing exploration in that space. and the scale of that kind of prospective operation is truly quite mind-boggling, both in terms of the capital expenditure, the depths, like the literal physical depths that you would typically be mining at, and also the very high grade of the polymetallic nodules that you potentially be sort of scooping up off the sea floor. Equally, the amount of environmental impact assessment work that goes into those exploration activities is pretty. It's a lot, effectively, at the moment. Very aggressive, but there's a lot of environmental work that goes into that kind of thing. And I think perhaps it's, at the moment, still new and probably quite misunderstood, I think, by a lot of people, even in the mining space, myself included. I think we have ideas of what it looks like in practice, and I think that varies a little bit. But as I said, I'm not really an expert on the matter, so I won't dwell on it. In the sustainability context more widely here in the UK, I think, to echo Ludivine's thoughts this morning in terms of kind of the messaging shift from these strategies and imperatives primarily, at least say going back a year or two, being primarily focused around green transition, clean energy, so on and so forth. We now have the very real sort of aspects around defense, security, and supply chain resilience being a lot more physical, let's say, than theoretical. With that, sustainability and general sort of ESG compliance still, at the moment at least, is playing a very central role here in the UK. Particularly within the context of financing. And generally, it's still accepted that if you're seeking to finance a project, particularly on the upstream extractive side of things, there are boxes that you must tick, both figuratively and literally from a compliance perspective. Naturally, then, national legislation varies depending on where you may be seeking to pursue a project. As I mentioned this morning, I think there is generally a lot of alignment between the UK and the EU in terms of pursuing consolidated standards, but this still, as we know, remains a real patchwork globally at the moment in terms of the different consolidated standards, both for mining, also for recycling, for waste classification, for end-of-life material. It's all very complicated, and I think until we have more of a concerted push and approach to consolidate these sort of different sets of standards, and there are a lot of groups doing this kind of work at the moment, I think it's there's still a risk that the complexity of it all could be counterproductive. Those are my thoughts.
Thanks. Chris, you've done some research in the past on the commodity minerals origin and trying to gather information throughout the years on its origin, and with that link to the ESG perspective, for example, that European Critical Raw Materials Act is aiming at. How reliable can information be, and how useful it is for the end users then to really follow those ticks that you mentioned in the downstream sector?
I think I'll spin this a little bit differently with a reflection on what's happened in the U.S. So the Trump administration has declared rollback on a lot of regulations and things like ESG being technically ignored. At no point has that been legislatively implemented.
But it's followed despite the fact?
No. That's the difference. So this I think is where one of the key components is fear is a very powerful driver for a company. And in the case, you're not seeing companies just walk away from the regulations because the Trump administration has an executive order saying that, because the laws are still on the books. They fear the lawsuits. They fear the implication of, whether it's in the market or in the courtroom or, future fines or what have you. And so you haven't seen them running out the door to leave that behind. And I think, there's a lot of rhetoric. And I think this is one of the things, whether it's, you're talking about the data and meeting the check boxes, but why are they meeting the check boxes? I mean, in a open market, it at the end of the day, it isn't really being driven by I want to do good. It's don't want to impose losses. And so I think if those structures are and they are enforced, you can view it as a reliable system. I think one of the problems, and I think this gets back to what we're hearing, I think in general, so one core difference between how the U.S. is approaching sort of its remining, let's take rare earths for instance, the public will accept some of this at a higher level. We're not dealing with the local, protestations, because there's a sense of need. In the U.S., culturally, defense is defense. And they will rally behind it, not because they're worried about an incursion, but they recognize that the economy is driven by the stability of the projection of that. That's a need versus just a want. And I think that's where I haven't heard the key. I heard inklings here about the EU transitioning from whether it's ESG related stuff or remining in Europe as a want versus the argument of a need. And I think that's it seems to be in transition right now, obviously with certain players, to the east. But I think that's a core difference between the systems and how they're responding right now. And again, the companies will respond based on what that regulatory framework looks like to reduce the penalty that they face. So I think altruism is a great motivator. It's good marketing, but at the end of the day, it's the penalties or the risk therein that's going to have compliance.
Well, you mentioned the defense part, or let's say the security part. To my perception, Europe ended its security, answering security questions when it decided it's going to invest into the defense industry. But further to that, they haven't really thought of what is behind it. And what is behind it is basically this sector. Because without metals, without rare earth elements, there's no high-tech security. And although it might sound a little bit too provocative, maybe we should take the advantage of the moment and start also trying to show that without us, there's no security in Europe. Any comments on that? Okay. Could you use microphone, please?
The first thing is that the policy conversation in Brussels is a tug of war between the Green Deal philosophy and economic and regional security. And it's happening now. And it's a difficult conversation because it feels like the EU is rolling back CSRD, CSDDD, a whole series of legislations, which, by the way, also doesn't help us with the citizen who are saying, but what's my protection here? So it's a difficult sort of pendulum type of conversation. What's interesting is that the mineral sector is struggling to adapt its narrative. So you still have major mining companies in Brussels who talk about their contribution to the transition and how they're ESG champions. And we are tone deaf. That's why I'm saying we also need to engage with Europeans as a sector, thinking about, okay, what are the strategic priorities of Europeans? Strategic autonomy, reducing dependence, shaping industry. We need to react to that, but we need to also be part of shaping these priorities. And it's hard for the mineral sector in general to engage constructively on this.
So what we need is an initiator of get together and start acting as one on the European level.
And I think global minerals and mining struggle to be present in the EU because we've never been here before. So you have European miners, they have their own dynamics and they manage their national and the EU level, but mining is not European. Actually, no mineral value chain is not global. So the global actors need to show up to the conversation a lot.
Do you think it's Europeans' advantage or disadvantage that we are 27 members and all the rest are just one nation markets or forces?
No, I was thinking exactly on that, okay? Because Europe is it's not a country, okay? It's an union. And compared with China or United States, it's completely different, okay? So, and as we have seen, all the political issues that are rising in different European countries. So, I don't know what will come next, okay? But that is a problem, to implement a common political, it will be difficult. I don't know.
Thank you. Any final comments? We're going to wrap shortly. Yeah, please.
Because we have something called neutrality, and that's a big inner discussion. And I think with security, it will take several years till the public really finds again that security and defense is a topic, because we have a long time, decades of peace now. So nearly all the people who are living now have experience to the Second World War, meaning they think security is
take it for granted.
Take it for granted in the end, and this has to be given to the public that it is not for granted. And this will take some time, especially because politicians to tell their people that it's not granted, it's not so easy. Because then you have also, because we had peaceful, peace is a big value on one hand, but that peace is not granted, but you have to do something for it. And everyone has to do something, even if it's only their own opinion regarding security and so on. So this is also a big change we just have started more or less to bring to the people. And this will take some time from my perspective.
Thanks. Since we are sort of coming to the end of the round table, and there's lots of you, one last sentence from each one of you of the next steps. Okay, you're from US, so I know what you're thinking. Let's start with Chris. Please stick with one sentence, okay? What's the most important first step we should do? Otherwise, we're going to be here until 8 in the evening. So please, Chris, start.
For an EU perspective, is get real in the conversation. I mean, that's exactly what we were hearing here. The world has changed. The conversation hasn't yet.
Thanks.
Maybe 2 words. I would say be honest and act accordingly.
Thank you.
3 things: capex, feedstock, offtake. That's it.
Thanks. Don't go to the 4th. 1, 2, 3, 4.
No, to create an attractive need, so to be attractive for everyone.
Thank you.
Thinking. One thing maybe. I think to echo Christopher's thoughts, the world has changed, and it's changed quickly, perhaps just this year in some contexts. It's becoming apparent that interventionist policy is necessary. I think direct involvement from the state is necessary. whether that be the UK or in the EU, the constituent members are also capable of making that choice. And some have already, I should add.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe no more silos between the policy and the industry, and no more antagonism between them. You need a unified stand. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think for the policymakers, they should decide on priorities. So it will set the strategy for us scientists, and the scientists, they should work on developing the processing capacity in Europe and environmental and the social impact reduction.
Thanks. Well, and what is really important, since politicians have short memory, no more the 3 priorities, right? Because they forget about it.
More European integration, united Europe. Otherwise, we are not relevant.
Ludivine.
I'm going to pick up on the same word, but integrated thinking. You know, we're talking about industrial policy. We need to go back to intervention, policy intervention, but we can't make the same mistakes of the past either. In the EU, we love to support our existing champions. Maybe we need to accept that our existing champions are no longer champions, and we look for the new generation of champions.
Well, I think that the reality is going to force us to reindustrialize Europe, reopen minings and so on. But I think that if we do well with the technologies of the 20th century, the final outcome is not going to be necessarily bad. We are not going to come back to the problems created in the 19th century.
Thank you.
You ask for one sentence, so I translate literally a French proverb. Necessity makes law.
Thank you very much. I would just conclude this, that Japanese have another saying, as divided we are vulnerable, together we can be strong. So I think the cooperation is the most important thing, and then ideas spring out, the initiatives get realized, and this is where the whole sector should come together. And I think that's one good thing that came out of this workshop, is also that we somehow, at least from my perspective, for the first time really brought together two connected sectors, but that they weren't really talking to each other in the past. So thanks again to everybody. I hope you could express what you wanted. I mean, it was a short time, and I was doing 3/4 of it talking. I'm joking. Luckily, you didn't hear me singing, because otherwise it would be empty. And thanks to the audience and to Bruno as a co-organizer. Thank you very much. And I wish you a successful 3-4 coming days at the conference. Thanks.